You know, imagination is a powerful, powerful tool that we have. Too often, I think people think, oh, imagination is somewhere located right about here, or the pineal gland, or somewhere like that inside the human being. However, I would invite you to consider imagination really extends much, much further out into the field, and we can actually work with imagination. It's not fantasy, it's not make believe, it's not pretend, although all those are certainly aspects of what we might call imagination. I really like to think of it as that we exist in an imaginal field. And when we do any kind of shamanic work or spiritual work of any kind, and we contact these various beings, spirit beings, etc., they are an aspect not only of the consciousness that is expressing as me. Notice I didn't say expressing through me. Expressing as me that collaborates with the larger field of consciousness in this arena that I call the imaginal field. So, and as you work with shamanic realities and work with helping spirits and receive visions and inspiration, revelations, etc., are they coming from outside you, or are they coming from the subconscious? Or if we can eliminate that duality, even briefly, for the experience of being and extending out into the imaginal field and connecting with other beings, other expressions of consciousness, to me, that really satisfies something. And in shamanism particularly, sometimes in workshops, somebody will go, well, how do I know I'm not just making this all up? And often my response is, well, if I'm making this up, it's working pretty well. My life is working. So that's one way to think about it. I also think about imagination is Joan of Arc. One of my favorite stories was asked by her inquisitors at one point, well, Joan, don't you say that you hear the voice of God? And Joan just guilelessly says, yes, I do. Well, how do you know that it's the voice of God? How do you know it's not just your imagination? And her response was great. She said, how else would I hear him? So that's an idea of what imagination is. So it's just a way to understand a little bit more our connection with this world of spirit, or the larger field of consciousness, or what I'm also calling the imaginal field. And they are really one and the same. So I now want to move to another aspect of shamanism, which is trance states. I've done hypnotherapy for a long time. Back in my early days in training as a psychotherapist, that was one of the trainings I took, was on hypnosis. And I learned at that point that we can call a number of altered states of consciousness trance states. And a trance state is sort of a generic umbrella that covers a lot of different traditions like meditation, shamanic journeying, any kind of ingesting any plant medicine or psychedelic would change your state of consciousness, certainly. The altered state of consciousness that we call trance states put us into a different vein. And in the shamanic journey, which is, again, the foundation for shamanism, it's one of the critical things that we need to know in shamanism is the shamanic journey. And it's interesting because there's a point where we move, whatever the methodology is, we move into this altered state of consciousness that Michael Harner has called the shamanic state of consciousness. Again, it's a useful term for that particular trance state that we enter into when we journey and go cross dimensions into non-ordinary reality. A number of ways that we can move into trance state: dancing, chanting, hypnosis, as I mentioned, meditation, etc., and certainly the shamanic journey. One of the most interesting ways is something that's been studied scientifically is the beat of the drum. The beat of the drum goes typically in shamanic drumming about 4 to 7 beats per second. And that's about the rate that you hear as I'm slapping my palm of my hand here. And in that beat of the drum, it's been studied scientifically. Melinda Maxwell, a researcher, wired everybody up their EEGs and EKGs and had them all wired, and discovered something very, very interesting. Typically, the brain operates in a waking state, which I trust that as you're listening to this, you're in a waking state, is operating in what's called a beta state, which is, roughly about 14 plus cycles per second. So it's a very active, alert state. The alpha state, which is a slower state of the brain waves moving or the brain operating, goes roughly about 7 to 14 cycles per second at any given moment. And that's that sleepy kind of almost dazed sort of altered state, often right before we go to sleep at night or even for a few minutes when we first get up. Before we've had that morning cup of coffee, we could be in this, what's called the alpha state. It's also a nice transition state. You know, we sometimes do receive information or insights, etc., in the alpha state. We go one layer deeper where the brain waves slow down even more. The patterns go about 4 to 7 beats per second, 4 to 7 cycles per second. Interestingly enough, the shamanic drumming is 4 to 7 beats per second. Melinda Maxwell discovered that after about 10 minutes or so of listening to this very monotonous, repetitive beat on the drum, that our brain waves actually slow down and go into what's called the theta cycle, which is 4 to 7 cycles per second. Now, that's not the only way. Like I said, there's other ways to enter into the shamanic state of consciousness. Bradford Keeney does a process where he has the participants in his workshops just shake that he learned from an African, Sangoma African shaman. The dancing, ecstatic dancing that could put us into that altered state too, and also prepare us, or even during the dance, we can send our consciousness into non-ordinary reality and there do the work that we are intending to do to bring back that which will benefit the family or the individual or the community. So that's an idea of what goes on with a journey. I want to address one other thing, and then there's a handout that's going to follow. It's a PDF on shamanic initiations. I think you'll find the reading very interesting. Shamanic initiations, I have a friend and a colleague who claims, and I believe him, that he's actually physically died about 6 times, and each time has come back and returned, obviously, to tell the story. And he considers each of those times that he's had a literal physical death to be a shamanic initiation. And he is a very powerful shaman. I've done some work with him, and he's a dear friend as well, and brother. And we go through life, we may not actually physically die. I had a death experience when I was very young. I've done a lot of work on it, regressed, etc. When I was about 6 months old, died, went to the gate, was sent back by the one I know as grandfather, or Ana Ooto, said, "You're not ready yet, get back." But other than that, I've had periods where I think were death kind of periods, where there was tremendous amount of loss and depression, etc. And then things would shift and it would be like a rebirth. And if you think about it, how many times have you gone through that death rebirth cycle? That death rebirth cycle, whether it's a literal physical death or a metaphorical death, meaning it's one of those valleys that we go through in life. And if you come out the other side, often what you find is that you've acquired certain gifts, maybe psychic gifts, etc. You may find yourself being called to shamanism as a result. So those are the shamanic initiations. And again, I think you'll enjoy the piece. It's by someone who has experienced a couple of initiations, one prior to doing shamanic work, and then one after she started doing a shamanic practice. So reflect on that a bit. And if you're keeping a journal, you might want to write about this, as to what kinds of death rebirth experiences have you had that have led you to go into this awakening process and ultimately be called to be doing things like this course And who knows where else that will lead. Anyway, good article to read. So please go ahead and do read that. And next, after that, we're going to do a shamanic journey. And I'm going to guide you through that journey. Call it a guided shamanic meditation journey. Oh, my nose itches.